been going. Yeah, I think I have a lot of overlap here with what you just presented, Jess. So that's kind of nice to see too. I think just as everybody is starting to get a handle on benchmarking and building these databases, that we have some commonality. We've quantified about 18 projects, all with Tally, with a few also kind of digging in a little bit to Athena, but this has been sort of our software of choice most recently. Most of them whole building scope. A lot of them have come out to be largely housing, with a few museums and K-12 projects. We also are looking at trying to get to the point of benchmarking every project. So hopefully this will grow. This has just been what projects have been active most recent. I'm the only one consistently modeling at the moment, but building that team, and we've had about 4, including myself, total modeling for the projects that we do have. We don't have any formal internal user guide, but similar to what you're building, Jess, I've started to sort of collect and aggregate resources and just documenting different project inputs to try to build those resources. So I wanted to start just quickly with why you might want to build a database for project benchmarking comparison, what you might be able to do with that. So first of all, just putting your project GWP in context, not just with targets, but then, you know, how does this project compare to our housing average, or our housing average of a particular construction type. So we can kind of benchmark that progress throughout time, as well as just sort of understanding where our portfolio shakes out, where we expect a wood frame versus a concrete frame building to be as a sort of firm baseline. And again, sort of looking at a similar type frame, but over time, you know, are we pushing that GWP down, and are we making progress? And then, of course, to document environmental impacts and, like Jess mentioned, keeping track of not just that global warming potential and carbon, but some of these other environmental metrics, and at least understanding what sort of environmental impacts these might track to. You know, there's some pieces you can start to look at just with, say, something that is low carbon but higher acidification potential. What does that mean? You know, what patterns can we pull out of our portfolio for our own knowledge, and also to, you know, to share with you all. And then we can also use benchmarking to help track hotspots and evaluate materials. So, you know, what building elements for concrete frames are typically the heaviest in terms of carbon impact, or, you know, nylon carpet tiles are hitting frequently as a top 5 material hotspot, and how can we mitigate that? So we can use this sort of tracking as well to make our design better throughout time. Again, just kind of understanding the different sources of carbon in different structural systems, and where the focus on mitigation might be for each of these typical structures. And then going, you know, a level deeper with a tool like Tally, you can actually start to see, you know, within my use of concrete, where is that impact coming from? You know, if I start first with trying to mitigate columns and PT slabs over foundations and shear walls, I'm going to make a bigger overall impact in the end. And so then, much like Jess was saying, you know, we're really trying to build consistency across projects. Need that to be able to benchmark and to compare, and includes, you know, what life cycle stages are you using? What are you including? What's the scope? And then really just trying to quantify as many projects as we can. So increasing that number of data points to be able to get kind of better aggregates of how our projects are performing, and also, you know, to just continuously make our benchmarking better. And so this also includes, you know, what other projects do we have going on that aren't maybe typically quantified now, including landscape projects and TI projects, and what can we learn from those. And so I think to help with that, what we found really useful is sort of a standard way to document. And so for each project that we are benchmarking, trying to have one file location where, you know, for all these projects, we are documenting certain relevant sections of the spec or the concrete mix submittals. And we have a Revit model and a tally model that we can refer back to. And, you know, we have an idea of who did the analysis and when, so that if questions come back up, we can go back to those projects. And then also similar to what Jess has started to build a sort of Mithun material and tally equivalent to try to make sure that these products that we're using frequently across the board on projects are being put in the same way. Especially across different users that might be running these tally analyses. And then also to track those questions and issues that come up while we're modeling, so that we have some sort of record of you know, what those issues were and how we might fix them if they come up, which they often do on later projects. And then one last piece that Jess sort of started to hit on also is just the usefulness of having a database to be able to start to look at carbon more holistically. And so some of that may include, you know, looking at these three projects on the left here are all predominantly wood frame construction, but this one with higher global warming potential has a concrete podium. And so how does that affect our overall carbon footprint? And, you know, what can we understand about how much that podium impacts our overall carbon footprint? Go back here. And then also sort of understanding things like, again, you know, what's the total square footage, and that changing how much that concrete podium matters, for example, or even looking at, you know, especially in housing where you have maybe another standard that could be residents and number of people in addition to square footage. And so looking at the graph here on the right, comparing two projects, you know, project A has a higher impact per square meter, but a lower impact per person. And so starting to understand some of these nuances a little bit better to tracking some of these other metrics that are just general project information pieces might help us answer some of these questions about why carbon is varying across our projects, or whether a footprint we're calculating is, you know, good or bad relative to our different myriad of baselines out there that we can compare to. That's all I had. If anybody has any immediate questions.
There's a question in the chat about how much work has gone into building that.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's the sort of aggregating all the resources does take a little bit of time. It's one of these things I think is sort of a tedious exercise as you're doing it, because it can just be a lot of extra, okay, I'm going to document exactly the issue I'm running into, or I'm going to spend time looking up this EPD or saving this in a particular location. But I think in the long term, that makes it easier. You have sort of a centralized places for all these resources that in theory have the answers to all your questions because they're being, added to as you're going through projects. And I think to really make it an exercise that you can trust, a benchmarking or comparison exercise that you can trust, you really want to try to make sure you have as much consistency as possible over projects so that you're cutting down on the uncertainty or sort of your doubt on how well you can compare these projects. I think in general, if a model can be set up well for tally, and that's one thing I didn't mention here, but it's something that we're thinking about at Mithun too, is how do we kind of streamline that process of Revit model for design to a model for tally, and what are some of the really easy things you could do, like say separate out a building, a structure, and an interiors work set, for example, so that you can start to kind of divide up these pieces and maybe make that tally work faster, making sure all the materials have a clear definition, that sort of thing. That once you get into tally and start doing that analysis, you can be down to, I don't know, maybe 40 hours for fairly detailed analysis, kind of assigning all those materials and then being able to dig into the results and pull out hotspots and that sort of thing. And then I guess, there's natural workflows then from there into EC3 and getting more product specific as you go, as you find these sort of hotspots and areas that you should maybe focus on.
There's a question about construction types and if you've uncovered anything about different construction types. Or occupant density, you showed the slide on occupant density.
Yeah, I think the density piece is something that we haven't explored more than just kind of thinking about, this is another way to look at carbon, and just acknowledging that things like a really small building footprint, but high, square footage indicates that you're building, or I guess just in general, yeah, that building density has implications beyond just that building scope for carbon. Also, it indicates that you're maybe in a more well-connected area where, maybe you're in a denser urban environment, and so you have all these sort of external benefits to carbon because of that. But then I think there's also just that are we and I guess maybe just touched on this too with, maybe you have 3 floors of concrete and then you have wood floors above that, and how tall should you go to make that worth it in terms of the carbon impact. And all to say, it's we have no kind of answer or stance on it right now, but it's just an idea that we are thinking about and trying to understand for ourselves, even what it means in terms of carbon impact, and I for sure don't have those answers today.
Yeah, it seems like it's a great effort to even QA your own models. So you go backwards and you say, okay, facades are in this range and floors are in this range. And if you're outside the range, it's like, let's dig a little deeper. So it seems like it's almost essential for as we go forward. Like if you're, if something's way out of whack, is it a real uniqueness of the project, or is it I QA'd a project where I didn't put the quantity of insulation by 10x. And it was kind of like looking at the broader scope, it was easy to see, but looking at the details was really hard to see. Do you guys have a QA program or some sort of a for embodied carbon? I mean, it seems like we don't have one officially, but it seems like it's an emerging thing maybe.
Yeah, I think, it's been similar to what you're sharing, just with that kind of gut check of this doesn't look right. And again, having all those other projects to compare to, you know, that makes it useful. I think otherwise it's some of it's that documenting what are common issues. You know, I know in the CLF forum, Alex has brought up previously the wood stud framing and the service life that Tally assumes versus what it actually is. And so being able to, you know, collect all of that in one place where somebody going through the model has sort of a QC list right next to them of here's common things that go wrong in a Tally model and, you know, what the fix is. And so the more you have something like that to build from, you know, you're hopefully mitigating the chance of having a kind of unusual error or missing, you know, missing a volume takeoff that's wrong or something like that in a Tally model.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you.